I'm Sherm Chester. Joining me on this edition of the Seacoast Sports Forum, got Jay Pinsonnault from the Seacoast Media Group. Of course, you can read his byline, Portsmouth Herald, Exeter Newsletter, Hampton Union, Foster's Democrat, and on seacoastonline.com. And joining me and Jay, a special guest. It's time for baseball. We've got Dave O'Brien, the voice of the Boston Red Sox. Well, Jay, being a season ticket holder, why don't you lead off? What would you like to ask him to start us off?
Yeah, I'm just honored to be on here, Sherm. So thank you for allowing me this opportunity with the voice and face of the Red Sox, one of the most historic franchises in all of sports. So I guess my question, as the new season is only 3-4 days away, what are your thoughts on? It seems like there's still a couple jobs to be won, whether it be who's going to be the starting second baseman, couple spots in the bullpen. Just your thoughts on those two open positions and overall your expectations for the upcoming 2025 Boston Red Sox season.
Well, my thoughts, Jay, are like everybody else's. I think just about everybody else. I am really excited about the season coming up. It's full of hope, high expectations. It's been a while since we as Red Sox fans have felt that way about this baseball team. I mean, last year was a very mediocre club. The teams before that didn't even measure up to that in the last several years. 21 was kind of an outlier, and that the Red Sox overperformed and almost got to the World Series. This year, from the foundation being the starting rotation on up, is a darn good baseball team. And it almost happened overnight with Garrett Crochet, who, by the way, is an absolute stud. He is. People in New England have no idea how good he is. No idea, because he's only 25 years old. He only has 32 major league starts. He's 6'6", about 250. He throws 100 miles an hour. He's a legitimate ace. And we talk about that when Eck was doing the games, Dennis Eckersley, we used to talk about there's a difference between an ace and a number one. Mm-hmm. Like when Rick Porcello was starting on opening day for the Red Sox, he was a number one. Real good pitcher, won a Cy Young. But you never considered Rick Porcello an ace. When Chris Sale came on board, now you had an ace. Well, that's what this guy is. And right behind him is Walker Buehler, who 3 years ago, was the best pitcher in Major League Baseball before he got hurt. He was 16-4, had like a 2.5 ERA. He's nasty. And I don't know him well, but from all accounts, from people I know in Los Angeles with the Dodgers, he pitches mean. He's a really nice guy. But when he gets on the hill every fifth day, he's mean. He's kind of mean-spirited. You love a guy like that as your number two. So basically what the Red Sox have are a 1 and a 1A, whereas last year and the last few years, they really had neither one of them. Tanner Houck was the Red Sox all-star pitcher last year, and he's third in the rotation. So I guess that tells you everything you need to know about the caliber of the rotation.
And we were just talking about off air about the kids coming up. Jay had a point he wanted to make.
Yeah, with me being in Hampton, and I've oldest son who's playing college baseball, and my youngest son is a sophomore at Winnicott, and he plays baseball, and we go up to Portland all the time, so we get to see all these kids before they get up. We've seen Bogarts, Benintendi, Devers, everyone. Last year when we saw Christian Campbell for the first time, he just seemed to be a different type of athlete where the ball just jumps off his. I saw multiple times in every game. It was the same thing where you could put him at second base, you could put him at short, you could put him in the outfield, but at the plate, when he connects to the baseball, the ball just jumps off his bat, and it has that different sound that people say about these special type of players. And I know you haven't been down in the Fort Myers too long this spring because you're dealing with college basketball, but what are your initial impressions on Christian Campbell, the versatility that he brings in the field and the presence that he has at the plate?
Well, I think they love him, number one, because he carries himself like a big leaguer. I had the game that he made about 4 outstanding defensive plays. He doubled. I think if you go back, opening day, you go back and say, when did he win the everyday job? It might have been that very day, because what he had to prove was that he could play the position defensively. I think they already know that he can hit. Well, he really hasn't hit much in spring training this year. His numbers have been a little disappointing. It was his job to lose. And for a while, he did lose the job. David Hamilton went past him. And then I think Campbell really started to realize, hey, look, I'm capable of playing with these guys. In fact, I can be a really good defensive second baseman. And in a game that had gotten away, it was like a 10 or 11 run game, he was still playing his butt off and still making plays. Those little things tell you a lot about a guy. And I think they like him a lot. You know, when you talk about the sound of the ball coming off a bat, the guy that strikes me most that way among those kids is Roman Anthony. I mean, Anthony hit a home run that went like 450, and it sounded like an explosion off the bat. The way people used to talk about Mickey Mantle, when Mickey Mantle hit one, it sounded different. And so he's got that going for him. And, you know, Myers played very well. He's had an excellent spring. Of those guys, he's probably had the best spring of the so-called big three guys. I'm always one, though, that you've got to do it at the big league level. They can talk all they want about minor league resume, but you're facing a AA guy who can't repeat that pitch 6 straight times and throwing in a teacup. You get to the big leagues at 7:00, you know, in April, it's a different animal. So we've seen a lot of guys. If anybody remembers Lars Anderson,
Yeah.
do we remember Daniel Bard?
Oh,
I mean, there are scores and scores. Well, Bard wound up having a pretty long major league career, but not quite what everybody thought it would be. That's what happens. The Red Sox typically kind of overdo it with their prospects. I'm not saying they're necessarily overdoing it with these 3 guys, but you have to do it at the major league level.
Right.
Dave Dombrowski used to say, don't fall in love with prospects. You don't do that. These guys, I think, though, they may be a cut above. We'll find out. What I saw of Campbell, though, in spring training, the one time I really got to see him for 3 hours, he was impressive.
Yeah, Lars Anderson was a can't miss prospect. And, he missed.
He was going to be Ted Williams.
He was.
Yeah. Well, you know, I just want to say that Duran, I think, surprised a few people last year, and he had a great season. And Cassis, I think, was off to a great start, and then he got hurt. Now, they proved that it's not a fluke. As you mentioned, Dave, when these prospects come up, they may have a red-hot first half, but once they go to that second time around in a pitching rotation, and the pitchers figure them out, the other team's pitchers figure them out, the weak spots, then, you know, it changes drastically sometimes.
Yeah, it's everybody up here throws 97 now. Everybody's got 2 nasty breaking balls, a great off-speed pitch, and, you know, you make those adjustments. And you know, you mentioned a guy like Casas. That's a guy who, because he's got a terrific eye, he's got great command of the strike zone, he's a patient guy. Even he had his struggles at times. And he has a really good idea what he's doing. He's a big, strong kid. He's got everything you need to be successful. But, you know, he can go through some pretty dark times and did right away. I think he's going to have a big year, by the way, personally. I think that's a really interesting position for the Red Sox at first base.
You know, I think Red Sox Nation was kind of wondering what was going to happen in the offseason, and Crochet gave some light at the tunnel, the end of the tunnel, and then everybody said, well, we need that bat, and finally got Bregman, and that tied the team together. But I'll always say one of the most important things they did was last year when they signed an extension for Alex Cora.
Yeah.
He knows how to get into the minds of those players. He knows how to relate to those players, because obviously when we got Bregman, the immediate controversy stirred up by the press was, well, now what about Rafi Devers? And we know it was a little tempest in a teacup, and I guess is that calmed down now? He's going to be DH?
Yeah, he's going to be the designated hitter, and I'm not sure he is. You know, he's putting a good face on it now, and he's trying to put it in the rearview mirror like, you know, that was blown out of proportion. I don't think it was. I think it was very serious. I think he's worked very hard at third base. You know, he made 12 errors last year. Alex Bregman won the Gold Glove. He made 10.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that there's a big difference in the balls you don't get to and your defensive range and all of those things. But I never thought Devers he was getting better. He was awful a couple of years ago. He was serviceable at third base last year. He was majorly competent. And I think he felt like he was still progressing there and his pride was wounded and all that. I think he talked a lot with Big Papi, talked a lot with David Ortiz, and I think that helped.
Mm-hmm.
And Alex Cora handled it beautifully, I think. In the end, he got what he wanted. He got a better defensive third baseman, and he got a great hitter hitting every night, who I think is going to be happy enough once his numbers are there, and they will be. By the way, the shoulders look really good. He's taken some hellacious swings this spring, and everything seems fine. So there are a lot of good signs here.
Yeah, I said to Jay in the past, I said, if Big Papi could just talk to him and say, hey, when he came from Minnesota, he wanted to play first base, and he did for a while, but then he settled into that DH, and he loved it. He took advantage of it,
Yeah, and thank God he did for all of us.
Amen. What about some of the now? Last time we spoke, they were experimenting with, or they were going to put into play the pitch clock, and also in extra innings, the man on second. Your opinion of how those have worked out so far, and also this new thing they've been testing out during the preseason with the computerized umpiring, so to speak.
Yeah, the ABS. And the Sox have seen it several times so far this spring, not at JetBlue, but they've used it in other places. I am not necessarily one of those who believe that is destined to happen. I know that Terry Francona, for example, managing the Cincinnati Reds this year, basically said, we're not even going to mess with it because none of our guys have used it before. We're not going to use it in the regular season. Why do it in spring training? I thought that showed a lot of wisdom. But in terms of the timer and the other rules that have put into play, I think they have worked wonders for Major League Baseball. I think the speed of the games, how games have quickened to a normal pace, the way they were when the three of us were kids and going to games at Fenway, 2.5 hours, 2 hours, 40 minutes. You don't need to block out 3.5 hours, 4 hours for an athletic event on a Wednesday night in May. That just makes no sense. So I thought it was overdue, but it's worked great. I think fans love it. I'm one of those that does like the idea of the ghost runner starting at. I like the idea of a doubleheader, each game being 7 innings instead of 9, which we tried for a while. I'm in favor of more teams making postseason play like the other leagues have. So baseball sometimes has to be pulled by a rope to get to the modern day, but these things are working. I've become a fan of the shifting rule as well. So I think a lot of these things have really worked well.
What about you, Jay? What do you think about all these we've just been kicking around?
Yeah, I really like the ghost runner starting extra innings at second base. I think the pitch clock really quickens the pace of the game. As Dave said, these players who have come up through the minor leagues, they had it already in their body of work, their system that was already implemented in the minor leagues. So these pitchers are used to the quicker pace of the game, and it speeds it up. And as Dave said, there's no need for a 4-hour marathon game on a Wednesday in May when you have kids still in school and you have to get up for work the next day. But I really like the rules they have been doing. I'm not necessarily a fan of the robot umpire right now. Yes, it corrects some calls at times, but I think the human element is also a key in this game. And I think Max Scherzer of the now Blue Jays really spoke out about that at the beginning of spring training when I believe he was a couple of his pitchers were reversed due to the computer umpire. So as everything, there's pros and cons with everything. But right now, I am a fan of the pitch clock, the quickened pace of the game, the ghost runner to second base, and the computerized umpire might have to take a few more years to get used to. But I think the game's heading in the right direction and attracting more fans, which is always good.
Obviously, we got to keep the fannies in the seats, to put it that way. Dave, I want to ask you about the games. You're going to be doing an exhibition game in Mexico with the Red Sox, and they just the Dodgers and Cubs got back from Japan. What's your opinion about the international flavor of the game now?
Well, it's probably a smart thing for Major League Baseball looking to, as we're talking about these rule changes, attracting more fans, younger fans, fans from all over the world who speak different languages and love the game. I think it's probably good for baseball. I'm not so sure going to Mexico for 2 days is a great idea for the Red Sox necessarily. We're going all the way to Japan like the Dodgers. I remember when the Sox did it, they came home and were absolutely exhausted for about 3 weeks because the time getting used to the time change is astonishingly difficult. More coming back, I've found, than going over. I mean, I remember when I got back from Japan, it took me. I thought I would be the only person in the world who would never adjust to my sleep schedule again in the States. But I know that's common of people. It's like, oh my God, you panic. You're up at 3 o'clock in the morning, wide awake and wondering, will I ever get back to a normal? And if you're a professional athlete, that's a totally different matter entirely. You need your rest. You need to be on a schedule. You require that over a 6 or 7 month baseball schedule. So I think there are pros and cons to both of those things.
So I heard you mention in the broadcast that some of the players are coming up directly from Fenway South to Fenway, and some are going to Mexico. How did they delineate who was going where?
I think they asked certain players like Trevor Story, for example, is not making the trip. Rafi Devers. Story's had a little bit of a back issue. Like he got scratched just yesterday from the lineup. They want to make sure he's 100%. Getting on a plane to travel all that way and then travel again. They want to limit some of that with him. Devers, they want him to get more swings. Whereas I don't think he was planning on playing anyway in those games. Do that back in the cages at Fort Myers. So different guys have. Some of the pitchers aren't making the trip because of the same reason. They're not going to work there anyway. They're not going to work till we get to Texas. So I know a lot of fans are like, "Wow, everyone should make the trip all the time." That's just not smart to maintain that posture. So
right, like you just said, it takes it out of the player, so it automatically puts you in the hole to start the real deal. So
yeah. So I think they had good reasoning. If people will pay attention, they'll realize these are really smart reasons not to make that particular trip. It's only a handful of guys.
Jay, back to you. I'm not trying to monopolize the conversation.
As we beginning another 6-month marathon of Major League Baseball, and you talking about how crazy your schedule is, and what are you most looking forward to after 5 months off of baseball, going into a new season? What energizes you, and what are you most looking forward to at the start of a new season?
Yeah, I think it's probably true of all of us who are fans. You're a season ticket holder for the Red Sox. So am I. My family goes to a ton of games. It's just the feeling that, hey, we're going to be good again. The Sox are going to be good again. Like Buster Olney the other day predicted the Red Sox are going to win the American League East. Somebody else predicted, might have been Jeff Passan or something, the Red Sox would win the American League this year. So we've gone from a lot of losing, and not only losing, but finishing last. Last year, a little bit different, third place. But what does that really mean to Red Sox fans in the end? This is a legitimately talented, good baseball team that has a chance to do some special things. We'll find out. We'll find out if they can stay away from injuries, stay away from losing streaks. But to me, that's the biggest thing, is there's a hopeful quality. And being in camp for several days last week and being around Bregman and seeing the difference he's made, these personalities, these guys have made a giant leap forward in how this team feels about itself, what it expects, what the organization expects. And that's what I'm excited about, just seeing that come to fruition. But every baseball season is its own book, and every month is its own chapter. That's kind of the way I look at it, calling games, and have for 35 years. And I'm dying to get going on that first page, in Texas on Thursday, just to see how good this team is going to be, or fulfill what they have for their own expectation.
And how key is a healthy Garrett Whitlock to the success of this upcoming season? He's been hurt a couple of years. When he's been healthy, He was very dominant in the bullpen. How key is it to have a healthy Garrett Whitlock to get this team where it hopes to get to?
It's a great point. It's not one that the typical fan even thinks about because they've kind of forgotten about Garrett Whitlock. But when you go around camp and you talk to other players, pitchers, trainers, coaches, like who's the guy who's really popped so far this spring? Garrett Whitlock is the first guy they talk about. And Cora is brilliant using this guy. And now that he's no longer a starter, he can get back to the way he used to use him a few years ago. Couple innings, maybe even 2 1/3 on a given night to protect the lead. If the back end of your bullpen's a little tired, then he has a few days off. You get to use him again on a Saturday night for maybe an inning to shut down the tough pocket of the lineup. Cora's great with him, and he's completely healthy. He's back to everything's disappearing. If you remember, like in 21, hitters would walk out of the box going, I thought I had him, and I missed it by that much. And that's where he's at right now, again, which is great.
And now we got Whitlock from the Yankees in the Rule 5 draft, and another pitcher that we got from the Yankees has really impressed, at least to me this year, is Richard Fitz. If you could comment on his development and he was announced as the 4th starter yesterday. What type of season could Richard Fitz have this season for the Red Sox?
I think time will tell. I mean, the reason he got that opportunity is because there were injuries, to Giolito in particular, Lucas Giolito, which is not a big deal. It was just a tweak of a hammy. He could probably pitch today if he had to. And Brian Bayo, which is a shoulder. I don't think the Red Sox are particularly nervous about either one of those, but they really liked what they saw from Fitz in 5 or 6 starts where he was going 5 innings plus every time. He didn't give up an earned run. Looked like he belonged. Got knocked around a little bit one game I had in spring training, but they're not concerned about any of that. He's a guy that just gives them depth. And not only do they have quality pitchers, they got 3 guys who can make the All-Star team, 1, 2, 3 in the rotation. But you bring up a Richard Fitz at a certain point in the season when somebody wears out or somebody gets hurt. It's a great thing to have pitching depth, particularly starting pitching depth. If you're going to be a good team and go to the playoffs, that's an absolute must. So he's a major piece in that sense.
I was just wondering if you feel that we have that lockdown closer this year.
Well, it's good. I think it's going to be Aroldis Chapman. I saw him pitch the other day against Detroit. He threw 13 pitches, 10 strikes, 3 strikeouts, and he touched 99, 100. So he's 37. He still throws as hard as heck. But I think the jury's out on that because he can also walk the ballpark. And last year, way too high walk ratio. That's been the case a couple of times in his career. If you told me that that's the Aroldis Chapman I saw the other day, that's the Red Sox closer, golden, terrific. He beat out Liam Hendriks for that position. Hendriks trying to make his way back from a lot of things, not the least of which was cancer. But I think Chapman can still bring it. He can still close games. I think Alex Cora adores him, loves having that guy. He looks like a Greek god, incidentally. He looks like he's carved out of granite. I don't know how he did it at this age, but still bringing it at 100 miles an hour. That's nice to have. Nice to have a closer who can throw triple digits.
Amen. A few weeks ago, I reached out to you, and as far as I was concerned, it was a special moment in sports broadcasting. It was when you were doing play-by-play on the game, and sitting beside you was Dick Vitale, who had just come back. All the battles he's had with cancer, and I tell you, that was a real special broadcast moment.
He's such a great guy, such a big heart, Sherm. He's talk about cancer. He's gone through 4 different kinds of cancer, chemotherapy, I get 50, 60 radiation therapies. He's 85 years old. But it's incredible because he remains passionate, enthusiastic. The voice is a little raspier, no question about that, but still loves to be there. He gets very emotional about returning. He's talking about 40 plus years of broadcasting on ESPN. He's become a very dear friend and a great partner. But I agree with you. I think to see him back was great for college basketball. It was great for Dick. It was great for college basketball.
And the message he gave to people fighting cancer, fighting that battle, that just, that was the icing on the cake. And to have you sitting
Yeah.
beside him, that was the right combination. You just
Well,
it was a real sports moment,
appreciate
sports
it.
broadcast.
He was back where he belonged, and we were. I mean, I was this close to losing it myself.
Yeah.
If he spoke, 5 more words, I was done. So I heard that from so many people listening to Dick's message about cancer and the fights that he has had. It was very inspirational.
I got to ask you about two other broadcasters before I forget. One that we lost over the winter, and to me, it was one of the legends. We lost Bob Uecker, Milwaukee Brewer announcer extraordinaire. And tell me, have you got any story about Bob Uecker you could share with us?
I remember Bob when we'd go in to do Milwaukee games, and he was like 80. Uke would come into the ballpark on a massive Harley Davidson.
Yeah.
And just and like you turn around and it's like you'd think some 25-year-old guy, big, muscular meathead. It's Bob Uecker getting off the bike. Hey guys, how you doing? Great to see you. Hey, do you mind holding that? And he'd hand you his helmet. It's like Uke was just the sweetest. And I remember years ago that he would walk onto the field, and it was the time when Major League had come out. And in Japan, when it came out, it was also a massive hit. And like the Japanese players would run to him, and they would be calling him by his movie name, and they thought, well, this character is like, what's he doing here? Does he go to every major league park and just broadcast games? It was like, it was incredible to watch the personality, and he was larger than life, but he was also a really down to earth guy. And you could talk baseball with him for hours. But as a kid, I remember watching him on Johnny Carson.
Oh, yeah.
On the Tonight Show. And he would have Johnny on the floor. I believe the stat was he did more Johnny Carsons than anybody over the course of his career. Carson kept inviting him back. He was hilarious.
The hardest part, though, was the end of their season. And his final words on the air was, "This one stings a lot." Because they came up a little short in the playoffs. I would like to have seen him at least get deeper into the playoffs last year, and maybe even to the World Series. That was one thing I think would have been icing on the cake for Bob Uecker. But it's going to be one of those voices we're going to miss. And another one I want to bring up, but he's still with us. He's in retirement now. Joe Castiglione, your old partner in the radio booth. How's he doing?
He's doing great. I just saw him at Fort Myers. It's like he never retired. I said to him, Castig, let me explain the tenets of retirement. You don't come to the ballpark and broadcast baseball. You don't get on the charter and fly. He's wonderful. He's in great. He's playing a lot of golf, but he's around the park all the time. He's around the team all the time. He's doing some spring training games. He's going to do a handful of regular season games. But I'm delighted, but I don't think he has any clue what retirement means.
You know what? I hope that it will happen this year. I know you guys on the TV side would kind of playfully at times show the booth, the radio booth, like especially on comeback, balls coming into the booth or whatever, foul balls. I would love to see him sit next to you during a couple of games this year, and just like the old days when Ken Coleman and Ned Martin used to flip back and forth between radio and TV.
Yeah,
but have him sit next to you and he's got so much experience and stories to tell.
Yeah, and by the way, and you know this, you and I've talked, I've never met anyone in or out of baseball who's a nicer human being than Joe Castiglione. And incredible family, but the sweetest guy. He's everything everybody thinks when they listen to him on the radio. That's Joe in real life. And some of the great moments that I've been fortunate enough to have in my career were just going to dinner with Castig, particularly when we were doing radio every day together. But it even when I left and went to do TV, we still were always on the road trips, and we'd go out and eat. And I've been to all of the finest Italian restaurants in America because of Castig. And I thank him for so much. He's just the best. He's the best person. So I totally agree with you. And I think he'll be around, so we'll have a chance to pull him in.
Yeah, put him in the booth with you at some point.
Yeah.
I don't understand why Steve Buckley or one of the writers, Shaughnessy or somebody, doesn't do a book about great broadcasters, sports broadcasters. Lead off with him. They've got you. They've got a bunch of guys. Sean McDonough. They need to put this stuff down. All these memories, all these stories you guys can tell before it's too late.
There are a lot of great. I mean, Joe's written a few books, but I don't know if he's ever written a book quite like that, talking about all of his experience with the Red Sox. Red Sox fans would love it. That's for sure.
And then one question I'll ask you about broadcasting, and I get this one from kids that are going on to college. They want to be broadcasters. Give that guy or gal that wants to be a sports broadcaster just a piece of advice from a premier broadcaster.
Well, the one thing I'd say is do it. It's a great way to make a living. It's a great way to live your life, and you're lucky if you get a chance to do it for many, many. You're truly fortunate and lucky and blessed to be able to do it for a long time. The best advice I ever got from a broadcaster was from Ken Coleman. And I met him when I was 16 years old, working at WKNE Radio in Keene, New Hampshire. It was my first radio job, part-time on weekends. Ken used to, the Jimmy Fund was a different animal back then. He used to drive to all the radio stations on the Red Sox radio network and do a fund drive for the Jimmy Fund. He'd get on the air with the afternoon host or whatever and talk about, hey, we need money for the Jimmy Fund. Please write a check right now. He came to Keene. I was the lucky guy to be on with him. Somebody must have told him, this guy wants to be a baseball announcer, this kid from nearby Marlborough, New Hampshire. And Ken said to me, if I can say one thing to you, learn to land softly on the ear. You're going to be in people's cars and in their homes and on their beach blankets down on the Cape for hours at a time. Land softly. Don't wear yourself out on people. And it was like the best advice I ever got from a broad. I loved Ken Coleman. He was my favorite radio announcer ever. So,
and I'll tell you what, and I listen to you all the time, and I've got friends that obviously listen to you on the Red Sox broadcast, but also the ACC and all the different basketball tournaments you're involved in, and games you're involved in, and you hit it on the head. You're smooth. You don't overdo it like some do. March Madness is a good example where they have to pull crews from everywhere, and sometimes some of these guys just they've got the bit in their mouth and they want to run. Less is more. That's what I said to somebody. Somebody wanted me to do color for a broadcast. I said, okay, I'll do it. But I told the play-by-play guy, I said, less is more. You need something? Look at me. I'm not getting paid by the word.
It's another great piece of advice. You're not getting paid by the word. Sometimes we're forced into, like, our Red Sox broadcast is a very busy broadcast. It's the busiest in Major League Baseball. There's a lot of sales elements. It's a 35,000 seat ballpark. It's not 55,000 like Dodger Stadium. It's not the size of market like Chicago, LA, New York. So, there's a lot packed in to those 2.5 hours. But, what I try to do several times a broadcast is just lay back and let the ballpark in.
Exactly.
Because what Vin Scully said is that's the greatest sound in sports. Nothing you can say can match that, the sound of the crowd, particularly at Fenway Park on a Saturday with the Yankees in town.
Right. Exactly. And the ambient sound or whatever the event is means a lot to people, just to be, let it just kind of soak in. Let it soak in. I know what you're talking about because I did the college public address announcing for the Wildcats at UNH, and it was a different animal than doing high school. Believe me.
Yeah. And it's people want to be at the stadium or at the ballpark. If they're listening or watching, it's because they couldn't get there that day, but they have time to watch a few innings or watch a couple of quarters of football, whatever it is. So let them experience that. Let them feel what it's like, where they prefer to be is sitting in a seat watching that game in that arena.
Right. Exactly. Jay, we'll let you wrap it up with Mr. O'Brien.
March Madness is underway. This is the first day of round 2. Who do you think is going to win, or who are a handful of teams that have a chance to be cutting down the nets here in the Final Four?
Well, the SEC got 1 million teams in, so I get Florida, Alabama, Auburn. You can pick up a lot of them, but My favorite to win, and I was really lucky to have Cooper Flag and Duke like 11 times this season. I got a call from the Boston Globe about midseason. They said, "You're the Cooper Flag whisperer, man. You've got him every single week." And I said, "I know," and it's really fortunate because he's the best player in the country, and he's from Newport, Maine, and a great kid, great family, and all of that. But he had a spectacular season, and he's the best player for my money on the best team in college basketball. So I've been a Duke guy all season long. I have no reason to think after they won by 44 yesterday that they're going to have any problem. But Florida, I think, is built for the tournament. Any one of those other SEC teams, probably Alabama for me would be, if they're hitting threes, look out, because they're awfully good. But I'm going to go with Duke because his ankle is sound, and they're a great basketball team.
And I was able to go to Cameron one year. I went to Northeastern, and they played Duke Thanksgiving weekend of 1994. That must have been. And I was able to get down to Cameron Indoor because all the Duke students were away. What a crazy atmosphere Cameron Indoor Stadium, and as a fan, how is it when you walk in there and when you broadcast a game from Cameron?
I've been there a million times. I mean, how did it strike you? I'm more interested to find out for you. When you walked in there, didn't you feel like, well, as far as basketball arenas, this feels like Fenway?
Yeah, it was great. It felt more like a high school gymnasium than a college gymnasium because it's so small and the stands are right there. And we were able to get tickets underneath one of the benches only because, as I said, a lot of the Duke kids were away for break. So we didn't get the full Cameron crazy atmosphere, but even in a subdued crowd like we were there for, in a blowout win for Duke over Northeastern, it was just a bucket list item for a college basketball fan.
I hear that all the time, and I've done a million games there, and they put us way up in the crow's nest, but because there's only 8,000 fans, and because that student section is right there, and by the way, I don't know if it comes across over television or not, but they're not the cleanest student section. I mean, some of the things they chant, you're likely to hear it like an English soccer match. Okay, so it's there, and I think Jay would know that if you went and sat in the middle of that section over there. But it's a blast. It's a tremendous place to watch a game and be a part of all that history. I love those kind of arenas, like Lawrence Fieldhouse in Kansas, one of my favorite places. Like Wilt Chamberlain played there, and I'm calling games here at Pauley Pavilion this weekend. I met John Wooden 20 years ago at Pauley Pavilion. Wow. He was sitting in the middle of the UCLA cheerleaders with the largest smile I've ever seen on a human being. But he was like 80 years old or whatever. And it was such a thrill. I got chills meeting John Wooden and these arenas are really special and they're kind of fading out. So I'm kudos to you for getting down to Cameron Indoor. It's incredible.
It was great. It was one in a lifetime. It was a great atmosphere. Great.
What about that ladies tournament now? You're going to be involved in that, calling some games. You got some favorites there?
Well, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to call the women's national championship game 7 or 8 times. I don't anymore because it overlaps with baseball and not able to do it any longer. We used to start the baseball season into April. Right. Now we're starting it in March. But I still like to be a part of it. And this UCLA team's really good. They're the #1 overall seed. UConn's going to be awfully tough to beat. I see them on a path to the Final Four. Paige Beckers is one of the great players in the country. But I'm not betting against South Carolina. I just think they're a little ticked off. They didn't get the overall #1 seed. They're a 1, but they're not the overall. That bothers them. And if I know Dawn Staley at South Carolina, that means she's angry, and that's not good for the rest of the field.
Playing with a chip on her shoulder.
big time. And I think she's got one anyway, but boy, it's now the size of Rhode Island.
There you go. Well, I know my friend Dan down in Jacksonville, he was watching a lot of that ACC tournament because he's a Georgia Tech alum, and he texted me, Hope he's doing the game tonight.
Yeah, I had Yellow Jacket. That's a great event too. And I did my first Duke North Carolina game this year in the semifinals of the tournament, and Duke was blowing them out by 24, and North Carolina came back with a chance to tie it at the buzzer. That's how that rivalry is pretty special. But for me, Red Sox Yankees is always going to be number one in my book as a New England kid. Born and raised in Boston and living in New Hampshire most of my adult life, and I think it'll be a great series this year. I'm delighted with the way the baseball season is shaped up, and just can't wait to get started on Thursday.
And we'll be looking forward to the kickoff of the season from Mexico, but also when you get to Texas, and we'll be with you all season long.
Thanks, Sherm. Thanks, Jay. Thanks very much. I appreciate it very much, guys. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thanks again to our special guest, Dave O'Brien, the voice of the Red Sox, for joining us today. And also thanks to my guest host, Jay Pinsonnault from the Seacoast Media Group. Catch his byline on Portsmouth Herald, Foster's Democrat, Exeter Newsletter, Hampton Union, and where I get all my sporting news, seacoastonline.com. So on behalf of Dave and Jay, this is Sherm Chester inviting you to join us for the next edition of the Seacoast Sports Forum.